There's a silent language that exposes who truly holds power and who is pretending to. You can sense it before a word is spoken, before a single expression crosses the face. It is there in the stillness of a man who doesn't rush to fill the silence, in the slow, deliberate movements of someone who knows that time bends toward those who control its rhythm. Power, in its purest form, never announces itself. It doesn't need to. The weak are loud, the strong are composed. In every room, hierarchy is established not by speech but by presence, by the subtle orchestra of eyes, hands, shoulders, and breath. This language cannot be faked for long. The body always reveals the truth the mind tries to conceal. When Machiavelli wrote of rulers, he wasn't speaking only of kings. He was describing a psychology that exists in every interaction, in every meeting, every relationship. You don't need a throne to play the game of power, only awareness. The person who controls their gestures, who restrains their impulses, who allows silence to do the speaking, instantly becomes the invisible center of gravity. The others orbit around them, unconsciously adjusting their tone, posture, even their breathing. Watch closely and you'll see it. The one who nods too often is seeking approval. The one who interrupts is afraid of being unseen. True authority rarely moves. It observes, it studies. It lets the anxious energy of others reveal their desperation. The body doesn't lie. It betrays status, confidence, fear. In this video, we'll enter that invisible territory. We'll strip away the masks, the rehearsed smiles, the performative confidence, and see what Machiavelli saw centuries ago. That power is not what people say, but what their silence confesses. Every room you enter already has an invisible structure, a hierarchy woven not through words, but through subtle exchanges of energy, glances, and rhythm. It's not what people say that defines who leads. It's how they occupy space. The confident inhabit silence like a throne. The insecure, unable to bear the weight of stillness, fill it with movement, noise, and justification. Power is never something you declare. It's something others feel. The moment you try to prove it, you've already lost it. Look around. In meetings, in conversations, even in casual gatherings, there's always a silent game unfolding. Someone leans forward too eagerly, chasing validation. Another reclines slightly, measuring every word before speaking, radiating composure. The one who avoids eye contact signals surrender. The one who maintains it too long exposes hunger for dominance. Every gesture, no matter how trivial, participates in this dance of submission and control. And yet most people move through it unconsciously, victims of instincts older than civilization. Machiavelli understood that politics was never confined to palaces or thrones. It happens at dinner tables, in offices, in whispers and glances. The world runs on invisible negotiations of confidence and insecurity. What we call charisma or authority is often just mastery of this unspoken code. The strong don't compete for attention. They draw it effortlessly by refusing to chase it. The weak perform power, exaggerating gestures that expose the very fragility they try to hide. The unsettling truth is that everyone right now is playing this game, including you. Every interaction becomes a silent contest between your authentic composure and your hidden need to be seen. The body votes before the mind speaks. You felt it. The tension when someone more grounded enters the room. The instinct to adjust your tone, your posture. That's not coincidence, that's biology bowing to hierarchy. The eternal theater of power. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Power, he said, doesn't announce itself. It's perceived. In his world, kings and courtiers wrapped their intentions in gestures because a single misplaced glance could cost a throne. To survive, one had to learn to see what was not being said, to read posture as confession, silence as strategy, hesitation as weakness. Machiavelli studied men not as they pretended to be, but as their bodies betrayed them to be. His writings were less about politics than about human nature, stripped of illusion. He knew that every movement, the way a ruler entered a hall, how long he held eye contact when he chose not to speak, could alter the balance of power more than any speech. He saw that the art of ruling was not performed through words, but through controlled visibility. The prince who understands this manipulates perception with precision. He reveals only fragments of himself, enough to evoke fear or admiration, never enough to be read fully. Even centuries later, the same psychology governs every social encounter. Your gestures are your modern court, your posture, your gaze, your stillness, the modern crown and scepter. This is why Machiavelli's insight feels almost forbidden today. In a culture obsessed with expression, he teaches suppression, the discipline to remain unreadable. He would say that the most dangerous man in any room is not the loudest, but the one whose body gives nothing away, the one whose calm presence forces others to question their own. His silence becomes a mirror that reveals everyone else's insecurity. This was Machiavelli's real lesson. Power is not the act of domination, but the mastery of perception, and the body is its first weapon. Once you understand this, you stop performing and start observing. You step out of the collective hypnosis of noise and into the quiet intelligence of strategy. The body leaks truth before the mouth speaks lies. Every micro-gesture, every shift in tone or posture reveals a layer of the psyche that words try to hide. You can see it in the man who avoids the gaze of those he secretly fears, or in the woman who smiles too quickly, offering warmth as a shield against judgment. These are not conscious decisions. They are instinctive betrayals. The eyes glance downward when the mind doubts its own authority. The shoulders contract when the spirit submits. The hands fidget when the inner world searches for stability it doesn't possess. In every subtle movement, power, or the absence of it, becomes visible. Psychologically, these gestures emerge from primitive survival mechanisms. The body, shaped by centuries of social conditioning, still reacts as if hierarchy were a matter of life or death. When someone higher in perceived status enters the room, the nervous system adjusts automatically. The breath shortens, the spine curves, the voice softens. This is submission coded in muscle and breath, the ancient ritual of self-preservation. Machiavelli would see this as the truest confession of weakness, not failure in strength, but failure in control. In contrast, those who command power rarely move reactively. Their bodies remain still, measured, deliberate. They conserve energy, sending an unconscious signal of dominance, the signal that they are not threatened. Every unnecessary movement is a leak of authority, every restless glance a declaration of insecurity. The difference between manipulation and mastery begins in how one inhabits their own body. To those who can read it, the body becomes a map of hidden intent. Once you learn to see these signals, the world becomes transparent, a theater where everyone's gestures reveal their private hierarchies, and where silence speaks louder than speech ever could. You've seen it, the handshake that lingers too long, the laugh that seeks permission, the posture that apologizes for existing. It happens everywhere, in boardrooms, coffee shops, classrooms, family dinners. One person fills the silence with unnecessary explanations, their voice slightly too fast, too eager to please. Another crosses their arms, pretending indifference while their eyes dart for approval. Power and insecurity don't wear uniforms. They reveal themselves in the choreography of ordinary moments. Watch closely, and every room becomes a silent movie about dominance and submission. There's the man who leans forward when he speaks to someone of higher status, his shoulders rounding inward, as if protecting himself from judgment. The woman who lowers her tone around assertive personalities, unconsciously shrinking her space. The friend who laughs at jokes that aren't funny, desperate to keep harmony even at the cost of self-respect. Each movement, each hesitation, is a whisper from the unconscious saying, "Please don't see my fear." Machiavelli would have recognized these gestures instantly, not as moral flaws but as cracks in the armor of perception. Now imagine the opposite scene. Someone enters the room and says little. They don't rush, they don't fidget, they don't compete for attention. Their stillness is not emptiness, it's gravity. People adjust around them without knowing why. Their gestures are minimal but precise, their silence unnervingly full. This is presence, the invisible currency of power. You've felt its pull before, that subtle dissonance when your body wants to yield even though no word was spoken. That moment when you realize hierarchy isn't chosen, it's felt. The world operates on this silent exchange, and whether you realize it or not, you are always part of its theater, playing a role written by the gestures you don't control. Weakness isn't the absence of power. It's the inability to hide its hunger. The truly powerless are not those who lack strength, but those whose need for validation leaks through every movement. You can see it in the eyes that dart for recognition, in the nervous laugh that begs for belonging, in the restless hands that cannot stand still because silence feels unbearable. Weakness is not physical, it's psychological exposure. It's when the inner self has no walls and every gesture becomes a confession. Machiavelli understood that the moment your desire becomes visible, you give others control over you. He warned that whoever needs approval, safety, or affection from the crowd is already enslaved by it. The body of the weak pleads for what the mind denies: acceptance, reassurance, mercy. Even when they speak of strength, their shoulders fold inward, their tone rises in pitch. Their micro-expressions betray fear. The weak seek power as an antidote to shame, not realizing that the pursuit itself reveals submission. For the predator, this hunger is a scent, an unmistakable signal that says, "I can be shaped." Inside, the conflict is unbearable. The weak want to appear calm, while their nervous system trembles. They try to imitate confidence, but imitation is noise and power is silence. Their need to prove themselves makes them transparent, predictable, easy to read. What they call humility is often disguised fear of rejection. What they call kindness is often a strategy to avoid confrontation. Beneath their gestures lies an ancient terror, the fear of not being enough to belong. And yet, weakness is not evil. It is the raw state of a consciousness that hasn't yet mastered concealment. The strong learn to feel the same fear, but not show it. To control the body until it obeys intention, not impulse. Machiavelli would say the first step to power is not dominance over others, but mastery over the body's need to confess. The moment you stop leaking your hunger, you stop being prey. In every encounter, one rules and one submits, often without a word. This is not cynicism, it is observation. From the moment two people meet, the nervous systems begin to negotiate power before the intellect intervenes. One person's breath steadies, the other shortens. One expands their posture subtly, the other contracts. It's a primal dialogue that predates speech, an unspoken hierarchy written in micro-movements and silences. Machiavelli saw this long before psychology had a name for it. He understood that human interaction is not built on equality, but on perception. And perception is decided in the first few seconds of physical exchange. The body becomes the battlefield of dominance, a tilt of the head, a pause before replying, the stillness after a challenge. These are the maneuvers of power. The one who can remain unreactive wins, because reaction is surrender. Silence becomes a weapon sharper than speech. It forces the other to fill the void, to reveal their insecurity through over-explanation or nervous laughter. The calm observer controls not only the tempo of the conversation, but the emotional climate of the room. Machiavelli's law of power is brutally simple. Nature despises a vacuum of authority. When one side hesitates, the other occupies. When one yields, even subtly, the hierarchy is sealed. Yet this isn't about cruelty or domination, it's about awareness. Every relationship, professional or intimate, constantly oscillates between command and concession. The wise recognize the current and steer it consciously. The unaware are carried by it, mistaking submission for politeness and compliance for virtue. The archetype of power is not the tyrant who shouts, but the figure who watches silently, making others shape themselves around his stillness. His restraint becomes presence, his observation, control. In this sense, Machiavelli's law is eternal. Power doesn't speak, it calibrates. The one who understands this doesn't chase influence. They let others offer it through their own unconscious gestures of submission. Silence is not weakness, it's camouflage. The world teaches us to equate noise with confidence, expression with strength, visibility with importance. But Machiavelli understood the opposite, that the moment you reveal everything you think, feel, or desire, you lose the leverage of mystery. Power lives in opacity. The strong speak rarely, not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand the economy of words. Every silence builds tension, and tension commands attention. The weak crave release. They rush to fill every pause, to prove their worth through sound. The strong let others reveal themselves, speaking only when their words can shift the balance. In this inversion lies the essence of strategy. The fool believes control is achieved by acting, while the wise know it's maintained by withholding. A predator does not chase every movement in the forest. It waits, watching until the target exposes itself. Silence in this sense is not absence. It is pressure. It forces others to project their fears, their assumptions, their weaknesses into the vacuum. When you are silent, people create stories about who you are, and those stories become your mask. You control perception not by assertion but by restraint. Machiavelli's genius was to see silence as an instrument, not a void. He saw that those who cannot stay still are ruled by impulse, and impulse is predictable. To remain unreadable is to remain untouchable. The loud are slaves to reaction. The silent become mirrors. In their quiet, others confess. What looks like passivity is in fact positioning, a deliberate choice to let others reveal their hunger first. This is the paradox of power. The less you perform it, the more real it becomes. Silence is not retreat. It's architecture, the invisible structure upon which true authority stands. Once you start seeing the hidden hierarchy in every gesture, you can't unsee it. The world that once looked ordinary now feels transparent. Every smile, every hesitation, every tone shift carries weight. You begin to notice who enters a room and unconsciously commands it, who shrinks the moment eyes turn toward them, who hides their insecurity behind exaggerated confidence. It's not judgment, it's awareness. The game was always there, but now you can see the strings. Conversations become patterns, meetings turn into battlegrounds of posture, and silence transforms into information. This realization marks the point of no return. You're no longer moved by appearances or seduced by noise. You observe rather than react, study rather than engage. The same gestures that once fooled you now reveal themselves as confessions. You sense authority not by titles but by stillness, deception not by words but by rhythm. Machiavelli would call this awakening the education of the eye. The moment perception becomes strategy. What begins as observation turns into armor. From this point forward, you don't just see people, you see through them. To master power, you must master perception, starting with your own body. Before you can read others, you must become unreadable yourself. Study the way you enter a room, how you hold silence, where your eyes rest when you're uncertain. Every unconscious movement is a leak of energy, a signal to sharper minds. Begin to notice your habits, the nervous laugh, the defensive posture, the compulsive explanations. Each is a small surrender. Power begins when you stop explaining and start observing. Machiavelli would say the greatest victory is control over the self. The body is your first kingdom, and its discipline determines every external outcome. Train your stillness as others train their voice. Learn to speak less, to slow your gestures, to let silence carry meaning. When you command your own rhythm, the world adjusts to it. Presence replaces effort. Influence flows naturally from composure. This is not theater. It's alignment between intention and expression. In a noisy age, calmness is rebellion. The one who governs their body governs perception, and perception is the only throne that cannot be taken. Every glance hides a negotiation. Every pause decides a hierarchy. What seems like casual interaction is, in truth, a constant calibration of power, a silent dance of dominance and deference. Words only decorate what the body already declared. The eyes measure distance, the tone tests boundaries, and every second of silence tilts the balance one way or another. Power is never static, it's fluid, moving invisibly between people, depending on who remains most composed. When you understand this, conversations stop being random. They become maps. You begin to sense the rhythm beneath behavior, to read intention behind stillness. The strong need no confirmation because they already own their presence. The weak reveal themselves by trying to prove what they don't believe. Machiavelli's insight endures because it exposes a timeless truth. Perception creates reality. What you project, you become. What you control, you rule. Power isn't granted, it's perceived, and perception begins in the smallest gesture, the unspoken choreography between your calm and the world's chaos. Look around you. Who controls the room without saying a word? And when you speak, do you? Observe the spaces you inhabit every day, the meetings, the conversations, the brief exchanges at the door. Notice whose stillness bends the atmosphere, whose presence quietly dictates the rhythm of others. Power is rarely loud, it lives in attention. The question isn't who dominates you, but what your body confesses before your mind intervenes. How often do you betray your authority with nervous gestures, over-explaining, or the need to be understood? Machiavelli would tell you that awareness is the first step toward influence. Begin watching yourself as if you were a stranger. How do you sit when you feel threatened? How do you breathe when you want to impress? Every unconscious movement is a window into the mind you try to hide. The goal is not to mimic confidence, but to embody clarity, the kind that needs nothing from the room to exist. The next time you enter a space, say less, observe more, let silence work for you. The body, once mastered, becomes your language of power, precise, restrained, undeniable. Machiavelli would say, power doesn't speak, it observes. The world reveals itself to those who can remain still enough to see. Every gesture, every pause, every misplaced breath is a signal, and those who learn to read them walk through life untouched by illusion. This is not manipulation, it's perception sharpened into mastery. The eyes that once wandered aimlessly now dissect intention. The ears that once listened for words now hear motive. Once you've glimpsed the silent architecture of dominance, ordinary communication feels primitive. You no longer react, you register. You no longer chase, you calibrate. This is the beginning of initiation into a deeper understanding of human nature, the hidden laws that govern presence, persuasion, and control. Machiavelli wrote for princes, but his wisdom belongs to anyone willing to see beneath the mask. Learn to read the body, and you'll never be deceived again, not by others and not by yourself. Subscribe, not for entertainment, but for training. This was the first lesson in the silent language of dominance, and it's only the beginning.